At 11:57 a.m. on September 18, 2025, the silence of a quiet residential block in Fremont, California, was shattered by the frantic tones. Dispatchers received reports of a violent altercation involving two men at a residence in the 600 block of Upper Vintners Circle. Within minutes, Fremont police officers arrived on the scene, their sirens cutting through the mid-morning air. They found a chaotic and bloody tableau. On the ground lay a 71-year-old David Brimmer. He was unresponsive, suffering from significant stab wounds to his neck and torso. Officers immediately began administering trauma care, fighting to stabilize him, but the severity of the injuries was too great. Brimmer was pronounced dead at the scene. Standing nearby, calm and seemingly unmoved by the carnage, was 29-year-old Varun Suresh. He did not attempt to flee. A knife was recovered from him, and he was taken into custody without resistance. To the casual observer, this might have appeared to be a random, senseless act of violence. However, as detectives peeled back the layers of the incident, a disturbing picture of meticulous planning and twisted vigilante justice emerged. This was not a random encounter. It was the culmination of a digital hunt and a years-long obsession. David Brimmer lived a quiet life in the shadow of a dark past. A former pastor at the Jubilee Christian Center, he had been convicted in 1995 of 3 counts of lewd and lascivious behavior with minor boys. The victims were between the ages of 9 and 15. For these crimes, Brimmer served 9 years in state prison. Upon his release, he was required to register as a offender, a designation that placed his name, photo, and home address on the California Megan's Law website. This public registry, designed to protect communities, would eventually serve as a shopping list for his killer. Varun Suresh did not know David Brimmer. They had no personal relationship, no history of conflict, and no mutual acquaintances. Their paths crossed solely because of the data available on that government website. Roughly 45 minutes before the first call was placed, Suresh was sitting at home, scrolling through the Megan's Law database. He was not merely browsing, he was hunting. Investigators would later search Suresh's phone and find a series of screenshots saved in his gallery. They were profiles of various registered offenders. He had been studying their addresses, their physical descriptions, and their photos, but he was looking for something specific. He told police he wanted to kill a offender because they hurt children and that he believed they all deserved to die. However, his ideology was tempered by a practical need for an easy target. He eventually settled on Brimmer, citing the 71-year-old's age as a deciding factor. He was looking for someone who is easy to kill. Having selected his victim, Suresh began to prepare for the encounter. He understood that walking up to a stranger's house with a weapon carried inherent risks. If he looked suspicious, Brimmer might not open the door. He needed a disguise that was innocuous, professional, and utterly forgettable. He decided to pose as a certified public accountant, CPA, looking for new clients. To sell this ruse, Suresh gathered props. He carried a bag to hold his supplies, a notebook to look busy, and a cup of coffee, likely to appear casual and authentic. He armed himself with a knife and set out for the neighborhood. Suresh was not ignorant of the potential paranoia a registered offender might live with. He suspected that Brimmer might be monitoring his street, fearful that someone might come to harm him. To counteract this, Suresh employed a strategy of normalization. Before approaching Brimmer's house, Suresh knocked on the doors of several neighbors. He asked for the homeowner, perhaps inquiring if they needed accounting services or simply establishing his presence as a door-to-door solicitor. This was a calculated move. By engaging the neighbors first, he created a visual pattern. If Brimmer was watching out his window, he would see a man in business attire carrying a notebook and coffee, politely visiting the entire block. It was a performance designed to lower the target's defenses. When Suresh finally reached Brimmer's residence, he likely checked his appearance one last time. He knocked on the door. When Brimmer answered, Suresh did not immediately attack. He engaged him in conversation. He shook the older man's hand, a gesture of trust and greeting. He asked questions to confirm Brimmer's identity, matching the face to the screenshot he had taken just minutes prior. Once satisfied, Suresh dropped the charade. "I knew I had the right guy," he said. According to court documents, Suresh then dropped his CPA props and forced his way into the home. Brimmer, realizing the danger, fought back. He managed to break free from Suresh's grasp and fled the house. Panic set in. Brimmer ran down the street, desperately looking for help. He saw a vehicle driving by and tried to flag it down, but the driver did not stop. Abandoned on the open road, he kept running. He sprinted 2 blocks from his home, putting as much distance as possible between himself and the attacker. He spotted an open garage door and ducked inside, seeking refuge. He began pounding on the door leading from the garage into the main house, screaming for help. A neighbor heard the commotion and opened the door. Brimmer rushed inside, but the safety was fleeting. Suresh had been relentless in his pursuit. The 29-year-old chased Brimmer into the neighbor's property. When Suresh reached the garage, he did not hide his intent. He allegedly told the neighbor to call the police, a bizarre twist intended to paint Brimmer as the aggressor, like he was the crazy one. Suresh then forced his way past the neighbor and cornered Brimmer in the kitchen. The violence that followed was brutal and intimate. Suresh pulled out his knife. During the final moments of the chase, he engaged Brimmer in a dark theological dialogue. He asked the man if he believed in God and told him to get his last words in. Brimmer, trapped and terrified, grabbed a rock in a futile attempt to defend himself, but Suresh later told police that the 71-year-old didn't fight back. Suresh stabbed Brimmer in the neck. He watched the blood begin to pour out and told the dying man, "It's over, you have to repent." Brimmer collapsed to the floor, turning onto his stomach in a final, desperate attempt to crawl away. Suresh stood over him and slit his throat. "I just wanted to make sure it was done," Suresh later explained to investigators. The struggle spilled out of the house and onto the front lawn. A witness inside the home screamed at Suresh to stop, shouting, "Not to do this in here." The noise briefly caused Suresh to hesitate. Brimmer managed to crawl out the front door, but he had lost too much blood. He collapsed on the grass. Suresh followed him out, knelt over the dying man, and used his legs to pin Brimmer's arms to the ground. He then delivered the final stab wounds to the throat. When police arrived moments later, the scene was static. Brimmer was dead and Suresh was waiting. He did not run. In fact, he told detectives that he never intended to get away with the crime. He claimed he would have called the police himself if he wasn't sure they were already on the way. He wanted to be arrested. In the hours that followed, Suresh sat down with investigators for a post-arrest interview. His demeanor was devoid of remorse. He laughed during the interrogation and described the act of murder as honestly really fun. He told police he was not sorry and that he didn't feel sad at all. Suresh explained his motive with a chilling certainty. He believed that killing a offender was a public service. "I'm hoping that because the victim is a pet, like, everyone hates pet, so like, it should be cool," he said. He framed his actions as a moral obligation, offering a specific justification for his brutality. "It is not your duty to decide whether heaven will accept them. It's your duty to send them to the gates," he told detectives. He admitted that he had looked for other potential victims on the registry and that he had specifically targeted Brimmer because of his age. The killing, in his mind, was a successful execution of a sentence the law had failed to carry out. While the murder of David Brimmer shocked the Fremont community, a review of Varun Suresh's history reveals that this violent outburst was not an isolated incident. It was the latest manifestation of a dangerous fixation with pedophiles and vigilantism that had been escalating for years. In 2021, Suresh was arrested in Fremont for making a fake bomb threat, criminal threats, and burglary. The details of that case bear a striking resemblance to the events of 2025. At the time, Suresh had left a suspicious bag at a Hyatt Place hotel. The location was significant. The night before, Fremont police had been involved in an officer-involved shooting at that same hotel, resulting in the death of an unrelated suspect. Suresh exploited the chaos. After leaving the bag, he made threats that led to his arrest. During the subsequent interview with police in 2021, Suresh revealed a disturbing ideology. He claimed that the CEO of Hyatt Hotels was a He stated explicitly that he wanted to kill the CEO and that he had been hunting the executive for a while. Just as he would do 4 years later, he was using a false narrative to justify violent intent against a person he designated a predator. That previous arrest resulted in charges, but it clearly did not dismantle the obsession. Instead, the impulse to punish those he viewed as offenders festered until it erupted in the fatal stabbing of David Brimmer. Following the 2025 murder, the Alameda County District Attorney's Office moved quickly. Detectives presented the case to prosecutors on September 22, 2025. Suresh was formally charged with Penal Code 187A, murder. He also faces charges for being an armed individual, causing great bodily injury, and residential burglary. The court has scheduled a psychiatric evaluation, a standard procedure in cases involving such aberrant behavior, though Suresh's statements suggest a calculated rather than psychotic state of mind. For the residents of Upper Vintners Circle, the incident has shattered their sense of security. Manny Singh, a neighbor who has lived in Fremont for 30 years, expressed the community's collective unease. "I'm shocked. I don't expect something like this to happen in Fremont because I have never experienced something like this in my 30 years," Singh said. He noted that while Suresh may have framed his actions as justice, the reality was far more sinister. "This kind of vigilante justice is not the right thing. I think it's more of a mental health issue." The case now sits at the intersection of public safety and the ethics of criminal registries. While Megan's Law is intended to inform the public, it also provided a roadmap for a killer. Suresh used the information not to protect himself, but to hunt. He selected a man who had served his time and was living out his final years, and he executed him in a premeditated, brutal fashion. As Suresh awaits trial, the community is left to grapple with the violence that occurred in broad daylight. The suspect remains in custody, held without bail as the justice system he sought to usurp prepares to pass judgment on him. He told police he hoped people would think his actions were cool. Instead, he faces the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison for a murder he described as really fun. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one. Until then, goodbye and good night.